United Spurs obviously is live on Off the Ball this Sunday. You're going to be there, Gary, in the company of Nathan, I believe, on Sunday. So we're looking forward to this game. And like, there's so much intrigue about it. The resurgence that's happening at United under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, the Pochettino links with United, that battle potentially for third and fourth here. Which camp are you in when it comes to Solskjaer? Are you in the he's had a decent run, but he's not really played anybody yet, or this guy is the Ferguson second coming?
I think ultimately I'm that first part. I don't think he's had a body of work that merits getting a Manchester United job. That's not to say that he can't potentially do it in the future. But if you're saying to me in terms of, do you take Solskjaer or do you take Pochettino potentially? I know we're guessing whether or not he is the next manager. Then Pochettino's body of work, his record is far superior to Solskjaer, far superior to many of the managers linked to Manchester United, bearing in mind that he's been doing it in the Premier League. Solskjaer's done brilliant in terms of finding a system that suits those Manchester United players. Ultimately, it's attack because they can't particularly defend well, and it suits the club's DNA, and he's been quick to play along to it in terms of attacking is our strength. But what is incredible and what is fascinating about all of this is that obviously the Manchester United hierarchy have to make sure that they're putting plans in place now to find a permanent manager in the summer. Now, there's no way in my mind that they're not doing this right now. But the very fact that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is doing so well, and people are saying, well, listen, can he potentially get the job? There's no way that those Manchester United hierarchy can be caught in other managers and saying and doing all the work behind the scenes and then saying to him, hold on a minute, listen, just hold fire a little bit here because Solskjaer's doing so well. They're not going to accept that. They want to know now whether or not they're going to get the job. Now, I think they'll be delighted with what he's done in terms of getting the feel-good factor back to Manchester United. But if he was to continue winning, it puts them in a really difficult position because the fans don't care about his body of work. They want to know that they've got a manager who's synonymous with Manchester United. So I think it's a difficult one. I think you're looking past histories in terms of managers getting jobs that they didn't warrant, the likes of Roberto Di Matteo getting the Chelsea job on the back of winning the Champions League. That proved to be a wrong decision. You can argue then, and the flip side of that is that Southgate gets the England job with no body of work that suggests he should have got it, but has made an absolute success of it. So it's difficult. The only thing I will say is that this is a massive test for him now against Tottenham. United have been brilliant in those 5 games. Of course, they are attacking football, but Tottenham will ask questions of them that those previous 5 games didn't.
Just on that managerial change, if it is going to be a managerial change for Manchester United this summer, they need to make a decision soon for the reasons you've just outlined. Exactly. When do you think that decision needs to be made? Is it at the back end of the PSG tie? And I guess if they've beaten PSG at that point, do you automatically say to Solskjaer, that's good enough, we're on track for top 4 potentially as well. You get the job, or what do they do? How do they react? Because I presume they'll have to make a decision maybe in a month.
Well, this is the problem. And if you think about this hierarchy at United, they have not been decisive enough. They weren't decisive enough when Pep Guardiola came out of his sabbatical and ended up going to Bayern Munich. They weren't decisive enough when they were flirting with Pochettino a couple of seasons ago. With hindsight now, that would have been the time to bring him in. So I don't know what they're going to do. I think the very fact that Solskjaer is doing so well and suddenly the United fans are buying into it puts a lot of pressure on them. Because ultimately, if Pochettino was to get that United job in the summer and Solskjaer has done so well, it's going to put massive pressure on him. This is a massive rebuilding job. There's no doubt about it. And there'll be a few bumps in the road. And as soon as that happens, those United fans will start saying, well, why didn't we give it to Solskjaer? He understands United. So it's a real difficult one. I think ultimately, if Pochettino was going to take over from Mourinho, it needed to be a clean break. It needed to be instant so that the whole of the United faithful were backing him completely. So I think this has got a lot of twists and turns to go at the moment. But certainly in terms of leading into this game, I think it'd be a brilliant game.
I mean, if United go ahead and beat Spurs on Sunday, maybe that rebuilding job, Gary, looks like a slightly less thing. I don't know. What are you seeing? Pat Nevin was on with us during the week, and like he was talking about the evidence of some of the work that Solskjaer has been doing with the players, because I'm assuming these are the conversations that the United hierarchy are having. You know, it's not, I suppose, solely a results-driven business for them in this context. What are you seeing on the pitch that's evidence that Solskjaer could actually handle this job in the long term?
Well, I've not seen it yet. I've seen what he's done in terms of his impact, in terms of cajoling all the players and making them happy and taking them away to Dubai, and everything's great, and that's brilliant. Yeah. When the sun's shining and the birds are singing, these players will play for you. That was never the issue. It's whether or not they can cope in the intense demands for a winter period and stuff like that. So the honeymoon period has certainly suited Manchester United brilliantly, and that's not to take anything away from Solskjaer. He's identified what was needed and he's give those players exactly that. Now, if you're asking me, are these players, those same players, capable of doing that in the long term to get Manchester United back to where they believe they belong, and ultimately what we normally associate with them is at the top of the Premier League, competing at the highest table, the biggest table in Europe? I don't think they are. So listen, what will be fascinating now going into these tough games? You've got the likes of Tottenham, Arsenal in the FA Cup, PSG, Liverpool as well. How do they cope with that type of pressure when they're up against better teams? And how will Solskjaer react to it as well in terms of the inevitable fact that they'll be under the cosh a lot more than they have been over the last 5 games? It is fascinating. If you're asking me to make a call now, no, I don't think they'll cope particularly well with it, because I don't think they've got a good enough defence. The very fact that he feels that attack is the best form of defence is obvious. He has to play on the front foot because you can't rely on that defence to keep teams out. And the real strange scenario is that Jose Mourinho recognised that and then started playing his midfielders as defensive midfielders when they're not good at that either. So he was compounding them out. At least Solskjaer said, well, listen, Pogba, go and attack. And he has certainly been rejuvenated.
Yeah, and as you say, maybe that only sort of gets you so far. From Pochettino's point of view, before we leave that specific aspect of it, Gary, do you think that, like he's talking this week about, I'd like to be here for 20 years. I mean, I think that it felt like a give me more money to spend at this team and I'll stay here for 20 years type conversation. Yeah. Like if United are approaching him now and they're sitting down in a service station somewhere having a little chef having a bit of a conversation with him saying, listen, this might be something that's on the table. What would you be advising Pochettino to do? Does he stay at Tottenham, hopefully get a little bit of money and build them into ultimately a better team than United over the 5 or 6 years, or does he jump?
Well, listen, it's very difficult to give any advice to him in terms of a success he's made of his managerial career. He's been spot on in everything he's done. Initially, he came into Southampton, and a lot of people, pundits in England, high-profile ones associated with Southampton, were saying, well, who is this guy? And that's lazy. Go and look at his work he was done at Espanyol. Impact straight away at Southampton, but recognise that there was a ceiling and went to Tottenham. Now, he's focused enough to think, and I think he'll know that when the ceiling's been reached at Tottenham. There's all well and good saying about this 20 years. That's highly unlikely. The very fact of Madrid, I don't see that really happening. I know people talk about Madrid coming in for you and you've got a decision to make, but I think this is a difficult time at Madrid. They're trying to redevelop their stadium, which is going to cost in excess of 500 million. They've got to rebuild a team. They don't have the financial muscle of previous years. So it's a difficult one. I think you probably look at the Madrid scenario and think, well, listen, that's a difficult one, and that's a job that comes around often, so he hasn't got to make a big decision on that. The United job is one that doesn't come around very often, so that is the big decision he has to make. But I think in terms of him leaving Tottenham, it'd be an absolute disaster in terms of everything he's built there. If they lose him now, going into the new stadium, I just don't think they'll recover.
Yeah, from a United point of view, by the way, it does strike me that the easiest thing for the United hierarchy would be if United were to go on a losing run. That actually sort of makes up their mind a little bit in a little bit more of a straightforward fashion. You mentioned a bit earlier on about Solskjaer's attacking policy. Do you expect that's something that'll continue then? And it sounds like it does on Sunday. And who do you think is going to win this one?
Well, I think ultimately I look at the fact that Tottenham are so good in and around that 10 area. It's not a case of the old-fashioned 10 who stays in there. They rotate with Eriksen, Ali, Kane even dropping in, Son, Sissoko from centre midfield. So that fluid movement will cause problems for United defensively. I know that they'll try and attack with the 6 players. Their fullbacks will get in advanced areas. They'll try and hold 2 midfielders in front of the centre halves, but I don't think they'll be good enough to stop Tottenham. Having said that, if you look at the qualities that Solskjaer has got in that United team, and that's that pace up front, Rashford through the middle, Pogba breaking from, they can punish Tottenham in a way that Wolves did at Wembley, where they caught them on the counter-attack. But it's a difficult one to call, it really is. United have the players to punish Tottenham, but I just feel that Tottenham have the team ethos, the know-how over the 4.5 years they've been with Pochettino to put this United team to the sword.
Yeah, it was one point that we wanted to end on, Owen.
Yeah, well, I guess we haven't had you on since Christmas, Gary. And over the course of Christmas, there was a worrying run of form for Seamus Coleman, which eventually resulted in him being dropped by Marco Silva. Kevin was saying on the show this week and at a media event that he needs to adapt his game to get to the next level. Would you agree with that?
I think what ultimately, when I look at what's happened with Seamus, I think initially when you come back from a long-term injury, I think I said it to you guys before, the excitement of coming back, there's a natural high, you're great, but then there's a lull after that. And I think he's probably experiencing that a little bit now. I think it'll be difficult for him in terms of the fact that I don't think he's ever been dropped before at Everton. You know, he's always been one of the first names on the team sheet. But if you're asking me, can he recover? I don't know him personally, but if I look in terms of his character and what I've seen him as a player, how well he took to that captaincy of Ireland, that he's a leader, then I think he will recover. But it's a challenge that we've all faced when you get a little bit older, that you've got to cope with, that your body has changed. You have to adapt your game slightly. Of course you do. And we'll have to see whether or not he's able to do it. But if you're asking me, do I feel and do I back him to do it, then absolutely.
All right, Gary, we did want to talk to you about Declan Rice, but I'm sure you won't be disappointed to hear that we've run out of time on that one. I'm sure it'll be back in the agenda at some point over the next few weeks as well. Thanks a million. Enjoy the games over the weekend.
Thanks, guys. Have a good weekend.
Cheers. Thanks a lot. Gary Breen on the line there, previewing the weekend's action. David Mannion on YouTube says, Leinster and Munster to win, Ulster to lose, hashtag OTB AM. Can I have the tickets?
But he's asked nicely.
He's asked nicely. I mean, I'm tempted by that, but it'll be in the lap of Tommy, David, so we'll see. We'll bring that winner before the end of the show.
Just one of the thoughts I had on what Gary was saying there, in terms of if the offer comes in from Maurizio Pochettino from any club, like, you have to say yes at this point, no matter what Daniel Levy offers, I think. Because I think in the short term, we're talking 2-3 years.
Well, you're talking about United Madrid, is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, ultimately, I don't know, it's stupid to compare a managerial career to a playing career, but if Seamus Coleman had his time back, would he be as loyal to Everton as he had been, for example? I know that the injury came at a very bad time and maybe his loyalty would have been tested a little bit more.
And also you wonder how strong the approaches at any point for Seamus Coleman were. Like,
we don't know, but
factor.
As a general point, as I say, it's not ideal comparing it to a player because age gets in the way and injuries can happen. But I think it kind of applies to a manager that a lot of these careers do end in failure, or at least a lot of these times that a club does. Maurizio Pochettino is an outstanding football manager. But ultimately, could the expectations of Tottenham Hotspur exceed to the point where his room for failure becomes smaller and smaller and smaller, and ultimately that one chance of keeping himself in that top rung of worldwide managers disappears, and his chance to manage Real Madrid or Manchester United goes with it?
That conversation is predicated on whatever Daniel Levy is saying to him in terms of his potential pot to buy players. I think that's really the only thing that's standing in the way of. He's got an exceptionally talented group of Tottenham players. He's hardly added to in the couple of years that he's been there. But I do think if I'm Pochettino, I'm saying, listen, I need some money because we need to kick this. If we're going to win the Premier League, I need some money. Is that there, or is it not there? Are we
underestimating the amount of money that Tottenham require? They didn't sign anybody last summer. It's not like they made cheap signings.
So is that not then the evidence that actually to win the Premier League they do need to make some signings?
Oh no, I agree, but are we underestimating the number of signings that they need to make potentially?
No, I don't think there's too many players to be bought, but I do think they need to add some if they're going to win that. I did listen to the Peter Crouch podcast. I don't know if you've listened to that. It's definitely worth listening to, but he says that he had a conversation with Daniel Levy at the time that he left Tottenham to go to Stoke, that he didn't want to leave at all, and he sat down with Daniel Levy and said, listen, I don't want to go, and actually I ain't going. He had 2 years left to run his contract. They were bringing in Adebayor, I think, at the time. And Daniel Levy ultimately said to him, well, if you don't go next season, you're not getting a squad number. Make up your mind. And Crouchy said, listen, I mean, maybe I'll reverse that decision. Maybe Stoke isn't such a bad place after all. He's been there for 8 years. Well worth checking out.
Yeah, for sure. That sounds like one. But like, I'm just kind of making the point that you go from £0 million spent to whatever is required. So like you're basically injecting 70 million straight away to get the quality of player that's required.
Which is not a lot for winning the Premier League and the Champions League.
And then you add a second player. So Daniel Levy basically increases his transfer spend. If you're going to say 2 60 million players, for example, goes from £0 to £120 million to create a title-winning squad on the back of building a new stadium, I'm not convinced that an investment is going to happen.